Hey YouTube, Stretch Line Bait and Tackle here, aka Old Man in a Kayak, and I want to cover a topic of what I learned this year in my first year of kayak tournament bass fishing. Now, I hadn't fished in over 20 years, and I recently retired, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to get back at it." My life was busy with work and things like that, but now retired, I'm getting to do what I love to do, and I want to cover the topics of things that I learned this first year of kayak fishing, the things I did right, and then there were things that I did wrong. And so I want to cover these myriad of topics here. And I just finished yesterday the North Texas Kayak Championship Classic Tournament yesterday at Lake Tawakoni. And oh my gosh, it felt like everything that I learned went out the window almost. I mean, it didn't go out the window. It was just the day started out decent and then progressively got worse. And it was an eerie end to the season that I put in and all the work I put in. But before I touch on that, we'll just start off from the things that I learned from doing things right and doing things wrong. Now, I'll start off with one of the things that I did correct. And one of the things I did correct was I tested my gear. I was planning on starting the tournament trail. I believe it started February of this year. So last year in December, no, actually it was October of last year, I started prepping and I purchased my kayaks, I purchased gear, got the rods and reels that I wanted and to use and the gear. And then I went out and I started fishing some small local tournaments and some month-long nationwide tournaments throughout the winter to get myself acclimated to fishing a tournament and to test my gear. And the things I did correct was going out in foul weather and actually testing my gear. And the number one thing, the first thing I tested was clothing, because you got guarantee as to the weather, and now if it's dangerous weather, they will cancel and reschedule. But cold fronts, rain, stuff like that, we're still going. So I took advantage of the winter months to test the gear, my clothing, and things like that. And of course, I started off with a batch of clothing and gear. And by the time winter was over, I had a whole new set, which was good because the first tournament was at Lake Palestine, and we had a bad cold front move in 4 days of sub-freezing weather. And the day of the tournament, it was 25 degrees. And thankfully, I had already tested my gear. I was good. I did not get cold. And so that was a plus. And I'm going to pop in a couple of videos here. And all summer and all through the year. And I thought my knowledge of having to dress correctly would help me. And it did help me. But the clothing I had might have been suitable for that HVAC work, but wasn't suitable for sitting in a kayak. And the first clip I show you was the rainstorm, and I got wet around the waist area where my suit was leaking, and that was the first set that I had on. And then I upgraded to a set that I had used up on the roof for extreme weather, and we had a snowstorm here, and I took my kayak out on the lake in the middle of the snow. And let me tell you something. The most beautiful, serene day I've ever had on the water, but that's a whole nother story. But so I had my second set, and same thing, all that snow, and it melted around my waist, and my crotch and groin area, waist area got wet. And that's not good when you're out there in the cold. And now, I mean, granted, I didn't get cold, but I was wet and it was uncomfortable. So I ended up going to Bass Pro Shops, and I actually bought one of their branded rain suits. And after putting all this stuff together and testing all these things, instead of getting the insulated outerwear, I went with the lighter weight, mid-weight uh, high protection gear and did my layers underneath, and that was a good thing. That was a positive thing because I tested that cold weather gear, uh, found what worked and what didn't work, and piled it all together. And then the things that I ended up sticking with worked because, like I said, it was 25 degrees at launch on on Lake Palestine, and then a month later on Possum Kingdom Lake, it was cloudy, rainy, and a 20 plus mile an hour wind at 36 degrees, and my gear worked. Another thing is I had bought some boots and shoes, and I tried out a couple different shoes, and I ended up going with NRS Boundary boots, the almost knee-high boots. Let me tell you something. Well worth the money. Well worth the money. My feet did not get wet and did not get cold. That was probably one of the best things I bought. The best gear that I bought was the NRS Boundary boots and the Bass Pro Shops mid-weight rain suit. So that allowed me to dress in layers underneath and kept me warm, and most importantly kept me dry. So that was one of the plus things, because I went out all winter testing my gear, testing my techniques. And then now when I started the tournament, I had my clothing right and ready, and that was good. What I wasn't prepared for was fishing under all conditions. Because in the past, throughout my life, I had been a fisherman, and I love bass fishing, and I'd gone and fished a lot, but always on nice days, you know. I mean, rarely was I out there on a bad day. So bad weather events changes fishing, changes the fish pattern, the bite pattern. And so I was woefully underprepared for finding the bite under extreme conditions. And I still suffer a little bit. I'm getting better throughout this first year, but I still struggle on windy days. Windy days is probably the hardest day for me to fish. And so I will work more on that this winter and see. I'm going to focus on some more windy water days and try to find a technique that works for me. Now, another thing that worked was my rod and reel combos and the line selection. I went through various combos. I had reels and rods, and I ended up moving a reel to another rod throughout the season, and different line sizes for different lures and different techniques. And so that worked good as far as having my setup right and having the right tools to work with. Woefully unprepared on finding fish when the bite dies. That's been my biggest struggle. I usually don't have an issue finding the fish in the morning bite when the weather's good, but if the weather's bad and conditions changes or midday, I struggled on finding the right technique, or you changing techniques, and that was another problem why I failed. Was I prepared mentally and research before a tournament. I would go on Google Earth and I would scope the water. I'd even use the timeline to go back and find drought times where the banks and things were exposed, where I could see the structure, and that was good. That helped me find areas. But my stubbornness stopped me from packing up and moving to another spot when the bite was gone or not there. And I'll give you an instance with my very first tournament. That was the one on Lake Palestine. And when I started researching, and the water was in the 50s, low to mid 50s, and the bass were already starting to move up to kind of like in their pre-spawn pattern. And so I had a game plan, and I studied everything, and I said, all right, I'm going to put into Nasus River, and I'm fishing the river, because if the bass are in the pre-spawn, they're starting to stack up there, especially the mouths of those rivers and near the spawn areas. What I failed on was we had that 4-day cold front, and I didn't take take into account how much it dropped the water temperature. And when I got there, I stuck with my original game plan and didn't change my game plan. And that was a good lesson that I learned, because sometimes you just need to pack up and go to another area. And when I launched on the river and got in there and I saw that the water temperature was 36 degrees, like a stubborn old man, I thought, like, okay, a lot of times an adverse weather condition will come in and the bass will just pull back a little bit and hunker down because they're already up in that pre-spawn mode. But this cold front was so intense and dropped that water temperature from the low to mid 50s down to 36. That changed everything. The bass basically hauled ass to the main lake and sunk down, and they just sat. And it pretty much reset the spawn. And I stuck with my game plan, which was not a good thing because it didn't work. And I should have changed my game plan, and I didn't. And that was a good learning experience. and as I've gone on, I learned some stuff and made some bad mistakes, and the not being able to, when I make my game plan and the bite's not there, I was reluctant to change because I had all that time and work prior to a tournament researching and developing a game plan and a plan of attack, and I'm stubborn enough that I stuck with it instead of changing with changing conditions. So that's a big lesson. That lesson I've learned and will change next year. Actually, it changed this year. So that was a pretty tough lesson. Now, this last tournament of the season. Oh, before I get to the last one, let me go to another one. Let's go to lure selection. I'm primarily a power fisherman. I throw a lot of crankbaits, a lot of square bills, a lot of lipless crankbaits, spinner baits. I will use a lot of top waters, like I love the Chapo or a frog. And so I'm throwing more stuff like that. And in the past, I'd thrown a lot of plastics, and I got away from that. And I was power fishing. And one thing I learned was that you can live and die by the crankbait. And I love fishing the crankbait. And I stuck with what I love to do. And at times it got me. A couple times I did decent and well on it. And other times I just stunk because my arsenal wasn't varied enough. And so towards the end of the year, I started practicing more with plastics, getting back into weightless flukes, Texas rigs, Carolina rigs. I'm working on my the Ned rig, and I haven't tried a drop shot yet, but I'm thinking if I get back into Texas rig, Carolina rig, weightless flukes, and Ned rigs, I should be okay as long as I add that to my repertoire and know when to use it. So I started getting back into that way too late in the season, but lesson learned. Next year I'll have that in my tool arsenal. I'll have some rods especially for those, and should do a lot better. Now, there was another tournament at Caddo Lake, and that's a lake I've always wanted to fish. It's a beautiful swampy lake, big shallow lake out in East Texas on the Texas-Louisiana border. And I got out there to fish it, and I'm fishing my style, which was topwaters and crankbaits. And I caught 7 pickerel, not a single bass. And I didn't understand why, because they're both predatory fish, and I'm catching one. Where were all the others when everybody else was catching them in the same area? And it wasn't just because I wasn't using plastics. I think there was 2 things I learned. A fellow basser, we were sitting there having a conversation, and I will pick up information, glean information from other people when they share it with me. And this gentleman told me, he said, when you're out there and you're catching pickerel, slow your retrieve down. And now, whether or not that works, I don't know, but I guarantee you next time I fish Caddo, that will be another tool in my tackle box, in my war chest. So the other thing, because that's a shallow lake, and I'm talking shallow, a lot of places I was fishing was only 2 to 3 feet. And I had my graph on the whole time out of habit. I just turned it on. Well, it's putting those pings out, but I think also it was alerting the fish. And there was two things. I think I'm alerting the fish that I'm there with those clicks. And the second was I was looking for channels and creeks and basically highways for bass. Bass like highways. They like ingress and egress points for wherever they're going to set up their ambush. And there's thousands of ambush places on that lake, millions of ambush places. But I didn't find much. I'm looking for big areas. I'm looking like, oh, here's definitely a creek channel. And I didn't see it out there because it's kind of like a swamp. And another thing I learned from a fellow basser was he said sometimes your change in depth is inches in a shallow lake, and that's all it takes is a 2 or 3 inch deep ditch that makes or breaks that ambush point, and it gives them. They just like that depth change. And granted, 2 to 3 inches isn't much of a depth change, but it sure is a big depth change when the lake is shallow. And you're talking about the majority of that lake is I'd say maybe 1.5 to 3.5 feet deep, the average. And so that was another thing I learned as I went on. And I'm going to stop for just a second so I can pause this, and I'm going to throw in a couple pictures of some fish. All right, YouTube. Rainstorm's right on top of me. I'm going to hunker down here, let this little rain shower pass here. Let me get my cameras and stuff put up. We're going to get everything. Okay, that was just a little collage of some of the fish that I caught throughout the season. And now, after all these failures and corrections and things throughout the season, I thought come the end of the season when we had our classic of the final tournament, and I lucked in and made the cut. I don't know how I did, but I did. I think I made it just by showing up to every tournament, more so than on my skill. But anyway, I get to this last tournament, and I'm much more prepared for this last one than I was the first one. And oh man, it went south. It went south. And let me start off with how it did. When I got there for my ramp, I had my place to fish researched and my game plan. And when I got there, the weather had not changed. Everything was stable. My game plan was good. I failed to actually consider the amount of time that it would take to get to my spot. I really thought it would take me 20 minutes to get there, and it ended up taking 32 minutes, which it's not that bad because a 6 o'clock launch and a 6:30 first cast gave me that 30 minutes to get there. I was only like 2 minutes late getting to the spot, but the problem was it was dark when I left, and my graph wouldn't get a GPS signal for my maps. And so I'm going by line of sight. I looked on Google Earth on my phone, picked out my bearing. I said, okay, I need to go to that point. And across the lake I went. And I headed over there. And when I got to the point, I see a cove on this side and a cove on this side. And so I'm thinking, I'm like, still no GPS signal. So I said, okay, it's this one on the left. And I go over there and I start fishing. And it looks good. It's flooded timber, flooded grass, and it looked real promising, but it was a shallow flat that was only, it was a 1 to 3 feet deep, which is fine, but it was only flooded because the lake levels were up, and it wasn't the cove that I meant to start in. It looked like the cove, but it wasn't. And after spending almost 25, 30 minutes running through there and not finding it, because I mean, it was just flat. It was just pretty much the same depth throughout this 100, 200 acre area. And I couldn't find a creek channel or a highway throughout there. And that's when I realized I'm in the wrong cove. So I bounce out of there. I take my kayak around. I found the right cove. By the time I get over there, I've wasted an hour and 20 minutes of the morning bite. So, all right, now I'm in the right cove after an hour and 20 minutes later, and I start fishing, and I catch one, and I find the fish. I said, okay, this looks like a pattern here. So I start doing that pattern. The pattern was grass, and the grass was scattered throughout. And these, I'm fishing this big cove, and there's a lot of little pockets and stuff. And the fish were in these little grass pockets, in little grass areas, in the shade, not in the sun, in the shade. But remember now, because it was 6:30 first cast, and I'm an hour 20 minutes behind, it's 7:40, 7:50 in the morning, almost 8 o'clock. By the time I find the first fish, it's definitely 8 o'clock, maybe 8:15. So now I start targeting that pattern. All right, and the grass areas were real scattered. So I'm moving from spot to spot to spot, and I catch my second fish. And I'm going to throw in the two pictures of the two fish I caught that day. I did two decent bass, and then right after I caught the second one, the sun was up high enough. It was about 10 o'clock by this time in the morning, and I'd already wasted an hour and a half of the morning bite finding them, and then another 40 minutes or so catching two, almost 50 minutes to catch two. But by then the sun was up, and my shaded spots were gone because the sun is almost up dead center. And so that bite died. That bite was dead in that cove. I stayed there for another 30, 40 minutes or so, and then I saw the bite was dead, and I said, okay, I still have a game plan, because I had my morning game plan, I had an afternoon game plan, and I said, all right, now I'm going to move to my next spot offshore, right? So I bounced out of that cove. I started heading to my spot, and I looked down at my graph, and there's a sign on there says low battery. And I'm thinking, like, I have two small lithium batteries that all they run is my scope. I use them for 20, 30 minutes in the morning for my lights. But other than that, I don't have a motor. I'm pedal power. It just runs my graph, and I've never run out of battery. I have never run out of battery before. But here it is, tournament day, and all of a sudden, 11 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, I have no graph. I'm fishing a lake I've never fished before, and I have no graph. I don't have a graph that points out fish. Well, what it does point out, it points out water depth, water temperature, and the bottom structure. And that's what I use it for. I look for those highways, intersecting highways where the bass travel with the cover. And without a graph, I couldn't find the cover on this lake. And I had put my battery on charge, and what I have is a trickle charger that I usually leave on to keep it topped off, and I didn't, and I just put it on the day before. And what happened is it did not recharge the batteries enough, because I usually leave it on, and this time I'd only had it on. I should have used my other charger. Mistake on my part. So then I'm fishing blind offshore, and now I've got to change my game plan, because I don't know. I can't find the spots because I can't see them on my graph. And the wind is picking up too. So I said, all right, the only thing I got is boat docks and boathouses. I'm just going to have to work these boat docks, boathouses, and hit the shady spots. And so I got over to the area of the lake where all the boathouses were. And unfortunately, the wind was coming in. So I'm having to fight the wind and try to fish docks and boathouses, which made it real difficult. And my game plan just went to shit. And so there's just one thing after another. But things I've learned. Hopefully this won't. Make sure this doesn't happen next year. And then, and to cap it all off, when I go fishing, I always wear. I wear a pair of lightweight pants, And these are your convertibles with the zip off bottoms in case I want to change them to shorts, but they're lightweight. So I always wear those. And then I also wear a long sleeve microfiber shirt for sun protection, and then a floppy hat. Now, I had the floppy hat, but I don't know. I got up the morning of the tournament and I said, you know what? I'm going to fish in shorts and a t-shirt. Well, and I used to do that when I was a young man. When I was a young man, I would go out on the lake and I'd be on a boat all day with nothing but a pair of shorts and a hat on. No shirt, no shoes, and I would be out there all day in the Texas sun. Well, that was when I was in my late 20s and 30s. I'm in my early to mid 60s now. So I get out there. You can see shorts and a t-shirt. All right. Now, see this? I am a lobster. I'm done. I mean, I don't really hurt or nothing, but it really drained me. And that I always carry plenty of things to hydrate myself. I carry the electrolyte drinks. I carry plenty of water with me. I don't eat a lot of sugary foods. I bring high energy, high protein snacks while I'm out there. And I usually bring a candy bar or something for that quick burst. And I had the food and stuff with me to fuel me, but the sun was just, it had drained me more. And that also affects your clarity too. So it sucked the moisture out of me, and I'm still hydrating after yesterday. But so anyway, those were the things that I learned from the tournament. I think I came in 11th or 12th place at the end. And granted, it wasn't that great because there was only like 22 of us. So I fished middle of the pack and I only caught 2 fish, but they were good, decent fish. So anyway, a lot of lessons learned. I have another kayak tournament coming up. This is the classic for the Texas Bass Nation kayak division. And actually the top 10% winners from this go to Tennessee for the nationals. So I need to have a really strong finish there. It is a lake I've never fished before. It's Lake Louisville. So it's close by. I'm going to be hitting that lake 2 times and do some pre-fish, see if I can find a pattern and kind of learn that lake a little bit and find some areas that I want to fish. And hopefully I'll do a lot better there. But anyway, a lot of lessons learned this year. I'm sure there's more lessons next year. I do know the 2 things I will be changing is there are 2 reels that I bought that I do not like. And they're pretty much, I'll probably throw those on eBay as a bundle, and I know my replacements I'm going to get for those. So there will be 2 reel changes. My clothing is good. I will make sure the battery issue is addressed because I have like 3 or 4 brand new spare batteries that I've won throughout the season and stuff, and one was even given to me. And so that will be taken care of, and I think I'll have a spare in there. Now, one thing that I did was let me go back here a little bit, is beginning of the season, my kayak's a pedal drive with a plastic prop, and I bought some spare props. I think I bought a bundle like 4 props, and I threw 2 in my kayak along with nuts and shear pins to ensure that I could change it. And it's a good thing because I fished Lake Fork in the native kayak no limit and broke 2 props while I was out on the water. And thankfully I could just lift up and change a prop in like less than a minute because I had the stuff there, and that was a good choice. Now, I developed a good repertoire, a good little box of spare parts that I keep in the hatch of the kayak to get me through. I did not carry a spare battery. A spare battery will be carried this next year, a fully charged spare battery that I can just hook up to my quick connect to my graph, so I won't lose my graph throughout the year. And then another thing I will change is I'm going to change my graph. I have the Humminbird Helix 7. It's an older graph. I mean, it's a good graph, and it shows me what I want to see as far as temperature, depth, the bottom, and the temp and things like that. But I'm been tossing over going, well, am I going to do live scope or not? I've decided I'm not going to do a live scope, but I am going to upgrade to probably the Humminbird It's not the Helix 10, it's the something 10. But anyway, it's the 2D side imaging. And so gives a much better picture of the bottom. And that I'm going to upgrade that one for next year. So anyway, hopefully the new tools and the missed failures on my part, the mistakes I made, and the corrections that I've made will help me be a much better bass competitor next year. And then next year, I guarantee at the end of the
All right, look at this big old catfish here. How about that? He's a big one. I'm gonna let him go because I'm out here bass fishing. So, woo! Come on, buddy. Boy, he was fighter. All right, YouTube, second one, just about 40 yards from the first one. This one's just a little bit bigger, so now I got two on the board, man. How about that? Starting off good. All right, YouTube, got my first one here, 14.5 inch. Made it on, got it on about my 10th or 12th cast, so got one in the books here. Okay, YouTube, I want to show you this dock right over here. This, if I can get it to zoom in here.